Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Welcome to all the yWhalers. You'll notice today that the seats are a little bit switched. I'm going to be taking over hosting duties because we're going to be grilling Jay and Zem today about some of the projects that they're building in the blockchain space. Truly exciting project. I think where TradFi meets blockchain technology, we're going to be able to see how those two worlds meet. And a builder in the space who's going to be able to walk us through their vision of how those two things meet. My name is Allan Matheson. I am the founder of Pear. We are a crypto hedge fund and investors in the space. And so I love talking with folks like Jay and Zem, who again can help paint this kind of picture of where it is that we think we're going, where this meeting between what's been built in crypto for the moment, which is sort of like crypto values, can possibly meet in the middle with traditional with traditional financial systems. And enhance them, make them better, and in that meeting, really bring something interesting to the market. Maybe I'll start just by throwing it out and ask you guys to give a very quick introduction. I think a lot of people know each of you if they've been listening to previous podcasts, but please, Jay, why don't you walk through a little bit of your background first?
Yeah, thank you, Alan. I love the change in the seats here, and it's great to watch someone else have fun with us. So my name is Jay Steinback, as all of you know. I'm the CEO of yWhales, and we're launching a project now called FinRamp. My background before all this is I did come from a family office, and so really a family business, and through that business and where I kind of was able to understand how institutions and large companies operate is from the time I was in diapers, I was allowed access to anything and everything in a very large retail operation, meaning that I understand, how enterprise level systems operate from ERPs, POSs, and kind of that base infrastructure layer. Because the family and for anyone that's worked in a family business understands generally, they're like, oh yeah, no, my son can do that. He understands that IT type stuff. So Web 1, I really built, for a very large company. I was given carte blanche to say, hey, currently today, we have fax machines on every single desk. We have a single computer with one AOL dial-up account. Go ahead and usher us into the future. So I got to do all those things, really on my own, understand how it worked, and teaching people during Web 1 how to use email, how to use a mouse, how to use a computer, how to utilize this new technology, and we flowed all the way through e-commerce and whatnot. I've obviously since exited all those businesses and we've moved on, but I'm seeing those parallels now. And so I really do understand, when we're talking about the ideas of self-custody, when we're talking about the ideas of how to manage wallets and assets, it's the exact same as teaching someone, how to use that computer and send and receive email the first time. Today, we won't even think about it. And in the future, we won't even think about managing our assets. But I find a lot of parallels, and that's why it's been really such an interesting asset class to play in. So thank you for the time today, Alan, as always.
And how did you get involved in crypto? Like what was the genesis of that journey?
As everyone is most likely heard, my first kind of experience was, obviously during, 8009, it's just like, okay, the world is crashing. And when you have a large company, you're always looking for okay, how can I hedge my bets? How can I, how do I manage my way through this when the credit market is drying up and everything else? And I read a very early article, before the Wired article on Bitcoin. And it was just kind of like, hey, this concept of digital money was coming and everything else. And so I really started to get interested in Bitcoin way back in the day. But there wasn't any really use cases for it. So I looked at it as, and they even called it a test. This is the test of what digital money would look like. So I've been very interested in blockchain. Overall, kind of gave up a little bit in between 2010 and 2014 because there wasn't, there was pizzas for 100,000 Bitcoins being sold and drugs on Silk Road, which didn't interest me in any way. But then all of a sudden Ethereum, it came on board and we start talking about an internet computer. And to me, that is when we talk about ERPs and anyone that's running an old Oracle system, and there's Oracle systems that that enterprises have been running since like the 1980s with like very few upgrades. Like this is the first time that you could suddenly see there's a reason for these companies to upgrade. There's a reason for these companies to start looking at this new generation of blockchain because it makes APIs just beyond obsolete. It's the difference of, having a fax machine on every desk and having a computer in the wireless tablet in the hands of every salesperson. And that's the way I kind of looked at the word blockchain was going. And I think that we're finally now, 13, 14 years later, after I first saw my first Bitcoin, we're getting very, very close to being able to see what that dream really looks like.
It's cool. We've been friends for a while, and I just learned a few things about your background that actually I'd never heard before as well. So, I love it. And then, you're joined by the brilliant Zemfira. And I love how you guys have this kind of like yin-yang approach. Pardon maybe that's not the right way of explaining it, but like Jay, you're kind of very visionary and really out there imagining what's next. And Zemfira, you come at this with like an amazing amount of experience from traditional finance, from like pulling strategy down into tactics. And rather than me trying to describe your background, why don't you describe a little bit about your background for us?
Yeah, thanks, Allan. And great to see everyone. So my background is actually you just right to the point. It's really engineering. I came to Canada from Russia originally to do a PhD. And a big part of that was actually in computer science and technology. All of the PhD was in engineering. And then over years, I went to McKinsey & Company for quite a few years and then joining Scotiabank, which is one of the top 10 banks in North America, to build a strategy group. And I think that was the time when, for the first time, I got introduced to blockchain. So it was 2016, it was early days, and we kind of looked at, as a strategy group, as, hey, what is this new technology that seems to be so disruptive, and what does that mean? And with my PhD mind, I just decided to go and try to fully understand what that looks like, and started taking coding classes and coding Bitcoin, and was just fascinated by what that looks like and what the change that can bring to the finance world. So many years later, when the time came to figure out what is next, because I felt that running a strategy at the bank, universal bank, is not necessarily what I want to do for the rest of my life, I met Jay, and we just kind of hit it off as his vision to build something based on the technology that I was fascinated about at the time of the bull market, where you can actually see the potential, was very enticing. And so that's when we thought that, hey, let's launch yWhales, let's see what we can do with it, and then eventually narrowing down our products to launch XR and FinRamp, and FinRamp being the capital markets infrastructure that is using blockchain technology.
I love it, and I would like. Obviously, we'll get into FinRamp, and really interested in that. If I may, why did you guys decide that you wanted to start building something? Like, what was the genesis from a more sort of holistic point of view?
Again, going back to, I was in a family business. We were highly focused on retail. So I kind of missed out on Web 1, even though I very much understood the concepts of it. And then Web 2, it was kind of like, it was an evolution of Web 1. And so it was not something that anyone could say, you know what, and listen, there's very brilliant people that showed up out of nowhere in Web 2. But this was kind of an entirely new asset class. So it's not just, an evolution of Web 1 and Web 2. It was almost a restart over. And so it reminded me of those early days of, in the early 90s, the way Web 1 was compared to Web 2. And so when we really started diving into this and just going, okay, the world is changing, the world is shifting. The technology stack that we've run on for years, which is Swift, it is beyond antiquated. It actually runs on, in a lot of cases, dial-up modems. I mean, that's how old parts of the Swift system are, and really took a look at kind of where this was, and then I look at what what was the technology being used for? And in all early cases, such as the MP3 files. The first use case of MP3 technology was, Napster and LimeWire and others just doing peer-to-peer trading, saying like, hey, you could make that file, you can transfer it. I remember spending hours and hours and days, downloading a song on a 14K modem, and then it downloads, and you're like, that's not the song I want. And then, so the technology was very cool, but then all of a sudden you have, the Apple Musics, the Pandoras, the Spotifys that come through, and they were able to kind of like say, that's great how you're doing that, but here's a different way that we can monetize this and make it happen and create this amazing user experience. And that was kind of what happened as I dove really deeply into Web3. Is I understand the concepts of digital scarcity. At this point, I can consider myself as close to an expert as possible on NFTs and blockchains and cryptocurrencies and all the fun things that we always talk about, Allan. But I go, this is just to me, an alpha test. Like, we're just proving that the ship can hold water, because if you can make, truly, and I mean truly, like a digital JPEG monkey, and I understand there's more behind all that than there, but if you can make something that has no real, intricate utility or value in the real world, hold millions of dollars of real world value. Well, now let's take that technology and apply it to things that do need this type of infrastructure. Let's take a look at really fragmented financial systems and fragmented marketplaces around the world. And for those of us in the United States or Canada, which you guys are, we may not think too highly or heavily about like, well, I put money in a bank and it's fine, and there's some minor efficiencies I believe that blockchain could maybe bring. But that's not, the 90% of the world that is desperate to override corruption and have some transparency, and really is looking for a brand new system that helps with globalization, and starts to eliminate a little bit of this centralized authorities that truly have done like damage to their countries, to their currencies and others. And so I think that there's a combination of these technologies that can be applied in a very significant way to grow the entire global economy together, and a little bit less of the fiefdoms. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is that there's nothing that I've ever seen and that nobody's ever been able to convince me that can scale it with the efficiency, speed, and low cost that blockchain can. Now, what it's being used for today, I think, is there's going to be an evolution of that, and that's really my thesis. But I'd love Zem to kind of tie in on that a little bit as well.
I think so. One of the experiences that I had throughout my career, both at McKinsey and then at the bank, was I was very blessed to be working in different industries. So anything from oil and gas from my first days, then aerospace, and then satellite. I was actually I had spent almost 2 years building satellites for MDA space missions, and then eventually joining McKinsey and then doing anything from infrastructure project to insurance to eventually banking. And the reason I'm bringing this up is actually it was almost my own evolution of understanding how the world operates. So from digging something from underground to actually bringing this all the way up to capital markets, which is what gets everything work. And I think I had a big aha moment in my life when I realized that without fixing the financial systems and financial sector, nothing else will work. And so I'm a big believer that if you want to make a big difference, you have to stick to the fundamentals and change them first. And I think that's where the FinRamp came in as, hey, if we want to do something within the blockchain space, it has to be within finance. And we just need to build on what currently exists versus try to reinvent it. And so that's my own belief. And this is why I was so supportive of the ideas they can kind of started developing. But like you mentioned, Jay is the visionary and he comes up with lots of crazy things. But this one I'm fully subscribed to, and this is why we're working on it together pretty much full time right now.
Yeah, and it seems like we've done a fairly good job in crypto, kind of creating this system, an alternative system. It's not Swift. It doesn't depend on centralized entities. And it has its own values and builders in the space who build around these very important facets of like decentralization and sometimes anonymity and things that are kind of at odds with the traditional system. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I think we probably all believe is that at some point those kind of converge somewhere in the middle, and that there's a middle ground there where the beauty of what's been built in crypto can help to replace a lot of the rails that exist within traditional finance. But we have these kind of two parties coming at it from different sides. You've got like traditional institutions who are moving in and adopting blockchain technology, and you have these crypto builders. Can you guys speak a little bit to like what's the problem you're trying to solve and focusing on to sort of help get us into that convergence of these two technologies as you guys see it, with FinRamp?
Yeah, so I think the name is right there in FinRamp. So we are a bridge, and so think of us as we want to adhere to traditional finance rules, regulations, laws and on auditing and everything else, but we want to start utilizing blockchain based finance. So there's not going to be. It's really hard to just do a hard cut from one to the other. Just say, hey, here's TradFi, and then DeFi just appears. And so we're really middleware. We sit in between, and we try to bridge that gap where we go, look, I don't think the DeFi world is ready. I just don't. And I know that a lot of people are working very hard at this, and we've made a lot of really, interesting progress, and there's a lot of new things coming down the road, but it's just not ready. And by the way, it's just not safe. So the technology being played with, we're seeing it evolve very, very rapidly. Again, we're trying to replace centuries old banking systems and laws. And so we kind of look at it as though, look, let's start bringing some assets from the traditional finance world. Let's bring it into a blockchain based, kind of sheltered cove where, we're fully, the anonymity, is not there. We're fully KYC, AML, OFAC compliant. So we're adhering to all rules and regulations of TradFi, but we're now in the correct format. So very similar to kind of transitioning from one to the other was we're now getting things ready to go. And so when there is that aha moment, when there is okay, we finally figured out wallets, we finally figured out, bridges and wrapping and all these other things, we already have an ecosystem of traders, of assets that's just ready to kind of move into that space, versus kind of like, okay, now there's the mad rush of trying to tokenize, and you kind of lose that on-ramp and that kind of first mover, protocol type thing.
And I'd be kind of interested to know, sorry, Zem, one sec. Your views on, you paint this picture of like, here's the way that we can create this ecosystem and fit it in the regulations that currently exist. Just, a little bit of a sidebar. To what degree do you think the regulations need to change over time in order to free up some of the innovation that's there? I mean, finance is very much jurisdictional. Like every country in the world has their own rules as to what you can and cannot do with when you're doing anything in terms of finance. And yet you have these blockchain capabilities which give to make a lot of those functions truly global. Do you think that regulation ends up trying to free that innovation and provide new rails that are more global, or just the opposite?
It's like a quadruple edged sword on that one. So I think, and let me put it in this perspective. If we did not have ICANN, which basically sets standards and rules. They don't say what you can send on email. They don't say, where you can send it on email. But if you didn't have them say, here's the standards of what an email is and what it contains and evolve over time, none of us, the email would not be the what it is today. Because it doesn't matter what email domain you use, what your tech stack is, where in the world you are, you can send and receive email very fluidly and it just works. And that's the type of regulation that we're looking at is there needs to be standards around, hey, here's the formatting, here's what you're going to send and receive. And that needs to be, again, blockchain agnostic. It doesn't matter what blockchain you are, let's go ahead and figure it out, like how to send and receive these things. Because wrapping, at this point, I'm kind of down on it just for a variety of reasons, because there's a hole in the system there. But the other part of this is, I kind of look at the rules and regulations, again, can move forward. And I think that the EU with MiCA has done a fabulous job of saying, look, we're going to take MiFID 2 and we're going to, there are some nuances and differences and changes, and we're going to roll those over into MiCA. And I think they did a really good job writing that. It's not done. It's not finished. And I don't think it'll ever be finished. I think it's going to continue to evolve the same way it is as the blockchain evolves. But that's the way we kind of look at it, is we have to have a starting point that really allows for the concept of decentralization. Again, I'm not on that. We're not there today. But we have to get there. And I believe that that's where the greater good of where blockchain is going to come through. But we need some rules of the game, and it has to be around consumer protection. And I'm not talking about government protection. They'll protect themselves, no problem. I'm talking about consumer protection, so that we can make sure that we're all playing, on a fair playing field, and that an asset created in North America is compatible with an asset that's created in South Africa, is compatible with something anywhere in the world. And it really does create that free and open system that allows for innovation to just scale rapidly.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Zem, I apologize. I may have, I don't know if you wanted to add something.
I can. So I actually wanted to address the question I originally asked, which is, why do we need to bring these two together? So one of the foundations of banking is trust. So the reason why banks are capable of doing what they're doing is because this is our ultimate trust system. We go and we give it to them what we cherish the most, which is our finances, our investing, and all different aspects of what makes us who we are, and at the same time providing for ourselves and the life of our families. And what blockchain brings is that aspect of trust that can replace multiple inefficiencies in the system. And I think bridging that together and bringing the blockchain aspects of blockchain that will eliminate certain inefficiencies in the banking sector while still adhering to regulations, and then making sure that the consumer are protected. And then, in certain extent, there's a reason why some of the regulations actually protecting they're driven by the different governments, and then they're driven by their own policies. I don't think we want to replace that. I think we want to respect that, but we want to bring in the best of blockchain right now. And then maybe the second point is on the evolution of regulations. And I think we've seen that again and again over years, as regulations are continuously evolving to respond to how the society evolves, to respond to what is considered to be norm, and to respond to the changing technology. And we also know that it's almost never regulation goes ahead of the tech. You have to get the tech there first. And so this is what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I think blockchain is developed to a certain point where now regulators can't ignore it. They need to do something about it. Personally, it does make me a little bit nervous, because you have some regulators who really are tremendously forward-thinking and understand the technology and the possibility of innovation and disruption. And you have others who really don't, and who probably are guided very much by misinformation about and by information that existed about blockchains from probably they might have been true years ago, but is no longer true anyway.
No, but I love the way you're touching on that, Allan, because I think there's something that at least needs to be said, is that the blockchain industry and asset class has done themselves no favors by the way that we name things. If you want to issue a token and it's something for fun, that's great. But saying something initial coin offering, or ICO, which rhymes with IPO, like, there's a lot that goes behind an IPO. And so I think that there's, very much a difference between, like, okay, we're going to take, 6 to 8 to 10 to 12 months for an IPO to make that happen, versus 2 to 3 hours for an ICO. And so I feel like, we kind of cause these problems and these concerns, because if a regulator hears initial coin offering, they're going, well, there's a lot of paperwork behind that, and you didn't do any of these things. And so us saying, hey, we want to distribute a coin, we want to airdrop, we want to, we have not done ourselves any favors on how we name things, because we're trying to be that, but we're not even close yet.
Yeah, What, you don't think non-fungible token isn't it's a great name? I mean, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more with you. Let's talk a little bit more about FinRamp in detail. Explain to us, how does it work?
Yeah, so the concept around FinRamp is that we're launching in the EU, so we abide by MiFID II rules and regulations. And the entire goal is that we are three phases. Number one, we have a walled garden. So meaning that we're essentially that sheltered cove that there's, we're able to say, look, we're OFAC compliant, KYC, AML, KYT compliant. So we have all the compliance that large institutions require. They have a fiduciary responsibility. So they go, look, it sounds very similar to what we're doing today. We're utilizing slightly different technology stack, and everything that we need from auditing, compliance is all built in from day one. So we start with that kind of like sheltered cove from the larger DeFi world of a little bit of chaos and concerns. From there, we add in, the ability to tokenize. One of the novel pieces of technology that we built is our token design. So we call these the 1155Fs. And we're kind of going through the process now, but it is much more in depth than anything else that we've seen, and that's been one of the challenges. Is like saying, "Hey, I've got a token and it represents this thing, and just trust us is fine." But without the ability to verify, with the ability to kind of see and control that data, there's a lot of challenges there. So we've got a lot into our token design and whatnot, and then the last is liquidity. And we've all seen this. You can create a token that's great, and it can be the most beautiful, amazing thing, and it can be a really valid project. We've seen people tokenize billions of dollars of real estate, but without liquidity, you really have nothing. And so that's where we really start with, number one, having again, OFAC compliant marketplace for internal users, or the ability, because we can turn these into securities and truly, again, now forcing existing regulation onto our tokens that we can route to external execution venues like an MTF, eventually FCAs, and theoretically, if the US ever allows it, and then an ATS. And so what that means is that you have not just this token design that represents a real world asset or with real world utility, but now it is an ability to trade internally. You can have people on the outside being able to route externally. So someone on a Bloomberg terminal could trade these securities. It also allows you the ability to bring internally stocks from the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ, anything you want. So again, we're that middleware. We're saying, look, we love what you built over here with TradFi. It's a quadrillion-dollar industry of all the assets that move around the world. Now we want to kind of come in here and we want to utilize a new technology stack that very similar to why the NASDAQ, appeared. And the very quick story behind the NASDAQ is the Dow and the S&P were paper-based, people running around, waving their hands, and you had to run around the floor. And it was very hard to bring new companies to that process. And so all these new tech stocks and all these little penny stocks were starting to exist and pop up, and they couldn't find liquidity. So they used computers for the first time and created the NASDAQ, and that allowed for like, hey, if you want these little penny stocks and all these little things like, hey, it's cute, Microsoft, whoever these guys think they are, you're going to have to go onto the computer and use it. And all of a sudden, that technology allowed them to scale, allowed for mass liquidity, brokers to use it. Compliance was much cheaper than the traditional route. And that's what we're stating right here is we're essentially saying there's a new technology, that there's a lot of ignored asset classes that are trading in small little dark pools. They're trading in small little exchanges around the world, and they don't have the proper liquidity because they don't have the proper exposure. So I think that's the easiest way to think about what FinRamp is at the end of the day, is we're exposing traditional assets, traditional securities to an entirely new technology stack that we believe scales better and faster than anything else. But Zem, please add on to that.
I think you nailed it. I think it's really about taking the best of technology and then being able to use that to facilitate trading, facilitate access to various financial instruments on a more global basis.
So maybe we can, I get it. I think theoretically very interesting. Can we walk through some use cases? Like, how would people use it? Maybe both like now, what would, what does phase one look like? But also paint us a picture, like 10 years from now, what does this look like?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is you need to take about 3 steps back. And I spent enough time and energy kind of really researching what has been done in traditional markets. And then what we don't want to do is just a one-to-one, recreation over on blockchain, which is I think what a lot of people have done. Like, here's a token, it's just a token, and it has no actual utility. But that's not what blockchain is. That's not what Web3 is about. So suddenly you can have vertically integrated solutions that, as if you're buying a Tesla stock on the NASDAQ, that suddenly you have extra utility, value, and things that you can do with this. Can you purchase a car with it? Can you get rewards for it? Can you be recognized for it? Can it be traded in other ways? And so suddenly you have the ability to create these vertically integrated tech stacks that not just you have potentially shares of a company, or do you have shares of a building or a property or anything else, but there's different things that you can do with them, that integrate the concepts like staking, or any of these other ones, minting and everything else. So it suddenly flows in that you can take a lot of traditional, rules and regulations and use a lot of the things that we've been playing around in blockchain, and it works very well. So real estate, I think, is the gold standard that everyone wants to get to. There's over $330 trillion in the world of real estate. It's a massive market, but it's a highly, highly regulated market, and it's an incredibly complex market. And I've seen time and time again people say, "Oh, we're tokenizing real estate," and I just gave a speech on this in London. No, you didn't. You made a token. Nobody recognizes it. No government entity recognizes it. No title company recognizes it. You can't insure it. And by the way, if you lose it, are you okay with the fact that your real estate is now gone? I don't think that's there. So let's take a step back and think about like your car. If you go buy a car, you register with the DMV, they give you your title, and you got a piece of paper. The piece of paper is actually meaningless. It's essentially, a derivative that allows you to say, look, I own this, but Allan, if I'd like to sell you my car, I'm going to sign this over to you. I'm going to give it to you. You're going to have to go to the DMV. They're going to make that change in the register to say, okay, it went from Jay, now it's owned by Allan, and here's a new piece of paper that have. So there's suddenly these very complex, workflows that we can integrate in to create those efficiencies, and also create more security around there. So where we're starting with is not starting with the hardest one, which is real estate. We're starting with, I think, the biggest challenge globally that we're seeing, and that's with the voluntary carbon credit market. I think it's one of the biggest, most important thing. Every Fortune 1000 company and Fortune 500 company has stated that they believe that carbon credits are part of their way to be more ecologically friendly and to lower their carbon footprint for their companies, or however they manage things around the world. Today, it's about a $2 billion asset class. And that's about, 90% less than where, and I'm sorry, it needs to grow by about 90x to be able to hit just the volume that people are asking for. So you have the voluntary and the regulated market, and both of them are completely underscaled. And really the technology stacks don't work because people need more than just a line that says, I bought a carbon credit. What'd you buy? Where did it go? And we're seeing kind of the trust in that entire ecosystem just be destroyed. I mean, it's Bloomberg wrote an article, Wall Street Journal just wrote an article, and that's not what we want, because there's really good people behind these projects that are trying to do good in the world, and we have people on the other side that have mass amounts of liquidity exposed that want to fund these projects, but we have a gap in between. And so we look at what we're able to do with vertically integrated solutions, like inside of FinRamp. And again, each can be unique. So carbon credits would definitely not be handled the same way that automobiles would, and definitely wouldn't be the same way that real estate would. But we can do custom vertically integrated tech stacks per asset class. And so being able to kind of tackle carbon credits and fix that. And again, the goal is that we're very inclusive. We're a marketplace. We're Rails. We're that lowest level infrastructure layer that helps set the rules and guidelines, and that brings all the existing certifiers, all the existing offsetters, and all the existing investors and brokerages to the table, and allows them to have a much more fluid experience, all the way from tokenization, funding of projects, liquidity, storage, and eventually to retirement and validation and verification of what these projects are. So in a very long-winded answer, we look at all these asset classes, we look at a variety of them, but we want to start with where we can have the highest level of impact. And that's why we're starting right now with carbon credits, because I think it's just one of the greatest challenges to take on right now. And it also has the greatest need, especially at a very desperate time for us.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess the thing that kind of occurs to me is, I live and breathe decentralized finance.
Yep.
And that's part of the heart and soul of our fund, but it's also like something I truly believe in. And I'll be frank, I have a real blind spot when it comes to sort of like walled garden approaches to blockchain. So help me understand why, like, what does blockchain specifically bring to this? Let's take carbon credits as the use case. What does blockchain technology bring specifically to that opportunity that like a centralized database approach would leave wanting?
Yeah, there's a variety of things now, and let's go through a long to short list. I think the first is access. The first is access and portability and past portability. And so the concept is, if it's a centralized database, it's never going to go anywhere. It just isn't. Like there's not even the ability to take that ledger, that line item out of a centralized database and port it anywhere else and have it. You could theoretically, people have tried it. It's a gazillion APIs, but then you're having to tell every single person that ever wants to know what happened, where it went, what this thing is, attach to our API and then write it to your own centralized database. So number one, we very much believe in the public ledger, but we also do believe in privacy and a number of other things that are required. So going back to that word middleware. Is I know and I do believe, completely believe in DeFi. I think that it's going to get there, and I think that the challenges are rapidly being evolved. Account abstraction is like holy cow, there we go. Now we're starting to think about this correctly, but that wasn't there literally eight to 10 months ago. So what we're doing is we're bringing this thing into a blockchain based format. We're putting these things where again they're in a shelter. Think of them as a sheltered cove before we go out to the stormy seas. Because once you go out there, there's really no coming back. So inside of ours, again, think of this as somebody loses their access, loses their wallet. There's a problem. They're all KYC'd, AML, OFAC compliant. We can get them back in. We use, legal proper custodians. So banks that are blockchain based, that are some neobanks, some large banks. So we're kind of just saying like, look, let's get it into the correct format. Let's take the time. Let's go ahead and not rush this, because there's nothing worse than hearing people have lost their assets, lost their value, and then lost their faith. And I think that's the problem, is there's no reason to rush at this point. We know the future has been decided. It's blockchain. There's nothing else on the planet that's even in second place to where the global financial markets are going to move to. So number one, centralized databases, the answer is just no. Blockchain-based finance, absolutely yes. But the last point kind of, on this, and I really get passionate about it, as you can tell, because I just get so excited about the concepts. There's some amazing protocols that have been built. So there's an NFT, lending DeFi program, that people can take their Bored Apes, their punks, whatever they want, pull them together, create liquidity pools. They can create baskets of assets and have lending done on it. And it's all, again, it's a DeFi world, but these are complex and, financial instruments that these guys have built. And we have partners. Some of them have partnered with us and said like, we've made all this for the JPEG monkeys and all this other stuff. And it works. It works very, very well. But we know this isn't the future. We're like, but look, we built it. We can take that exact same assets now. And because we're a blockchain based, we've got, carbon credits. By the time we're ready, there may be, 2 or 3 other assets in here, like trade finance and others. And suddenly, the code that they've already written, everything that they've built and proven, now instead of having a couple, $100 million market that's moving through it, now suddenly there's trillions of dollars that can be flowing through this, within minutes of those gates opening. And I think that's what's most exciting, is suddenly we don't have to go and say, hey, we made this weird centralized server. Would you like to build an app inside of our ecosystem? They've already done the work. They've already proven that it works. They've already kind of pressure tested it. And that's the way I really think of a lot of what DeFi is today, is getting prepped and getting ready for the storm. I mean, we're going to go from, right now we're a $1 trillion market cap. Like entire cryptocurrency right now is like $1 trillion. We got to $3 trillion. It's nothing. Like it's a drop in the bucket. There's like $1.4 quadrillion, around the world of assets. And so I look at it as keep working. I mean, the projects you have, because one day Aave, Uni, they may be moving, 10, 20 trillion dollars a day. And I hope that they're efficient, and I hope that they're, pressure tested and ready to go by then.
Well, I hope so too. Can you talk a little bit about the tech stack itself? Like, I know you're still in the building phase, and we can, chat a little bit about phases. But I'd love to know too about, like, how do you envision sort of the tech stack and how it's going to be built out and what phases you're at.
Yeah, I'm gonna give a quick overview, and then I really want Zemfira to jump in because this is where she really shines. As you can tell, I have no PhDs, and she has all of them, multiples of them. And so the concepts that we have, just right off the bat, is number one, safety first. We want it to be safe. We want it to be secure. The loss of a single dollar of someone's asset or wealth, that's a critical area that we don't want to deal with. So number one, we start with safety and security. Then we kind of go, we want rules, regulations, tax laws, everything else to be followed. So number one, everyone's got a fiduciary responsibility, especially when we're talking about large institutions. So we want to make sure that the workflows that they already have are more efficient over in the FinRamp ecosystem, that they're not having to reinvent the wheel and hire a bunch of kids that they don't understand traditional finance. So we're kind of really porting things in. A couple other things that I'd say we believe in is chain agnostic. There's people that believe that ETH is the future. There's people that believe that Solana is the future. And then JP Morgan went and built Onyx, and they built Onyx. That's all I have to say. And they're going to use it, and that's fine. So where the original tokenizer wants to put that token, they're going to have to make a choice. And I think that there's going to be different solutions across the board. There's not going to be one chain that rules them all, except for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to do its thing, but it's not at this point EVM compatible. So I think that really there's going to be, we've got to be able to be fluid. We have to be able to be flexible, and we have to be able to be forward compatible, because I still don't believe that we've seen the best use case yet. And potentially there's new chains that Allan, you and I are both familiar with that are coming down the pipe that are really going to be game changers, especially for speed and efficiency and cost. And that's the one thing no one's going to pay more for a less secure system. No one's going to pay more for a slower, more kind of, convoluted experience. And so I think that we're starting to see that now as institutions go, look, I need to lower my costs. I need to increase my reach. And so those are a couple of the thoughts I'll throw right out there. But Zem,
Zem.
Yeah.
Can you add to that?
Yeah, I can add to that. So I think a little bit more tactically what that really looks like. We're really looking at a phased approach, and we really believe that reinventing the wheel is the wrong approach as well. So our idea is, let's start with something where we feel we can add a lot of value to the current market. Let's take on different parts and pieces that already exist from the tech stack standpoint and modify them or augment them with blockchain capabilities, and ultimately launch our first phase of the project. And as we're building, as we're learning from it, we're going to be adding features. So maybe one of the two things that I really wanted to highlight in phase one, definitely the concept of token gating in digital ID. So the idea that any entity or any person who is going to be joining our ecosystem or walled garden are fully KYC'd, but also they're able to prove the fact that's been KYC'd through FinRamp by the digital ID that they're going to be holding. That will also help them to access multiple other systems that we envision. The second part is the 1155 token. So it's we call it 1155. It's really built on the ERC standard, but ultimately it allows, with additions that we are contemplating, it will allow to add to it additional information that could be verified. And then with the systems that we envision, you can have multiple verifiers who can provide that trust that is necessary to say that this is a real token. There's documents associated with that are in custody of certain custodians that ultimately will allow us to add a layer of trust and verification that is required for what we think the next phase would be, which is really going into the security space. And phase two is all about security. So basically, carbon credits is an interesting space because it allows us to have a sandbox and play without having very specific licensing, specifically in Europe. But the next phase is going into MiFID II and MiCA and being fully regulated. So adding up layers of that is phase 2. And then phase 3 is actually replacing that all with more what DeFi currently looks like. But I think that is really more out there and something we just really need to learn first and then walk before we run, before we can comment on that.
And so, that's fascinating. Thank you. I guess just sort of reflecting and thinking a little bit about the business itself beyond just the technology. There's a lot of work that needs to go in there. You need to obviously have both sides of the equation, sell side, both buy and sell side. You need to create markets. Just out of curiosity, like, who are you speaking with? You're speaking with large financial institutions. You're speaking with funds and family offices. Like, give us a sense of, I'll ask a little bit more about the entirety of your team, but I imagine your team is out there building relationships and talking to different folks in the ecosystem to be able to move out to the market pretty quickly. Maybe share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So number one, we've got, right now a little bit over 30 strategic alliance partners and advisors, meaning that we kind of really do hunt out people that have, either companies that are already in the space, brokerages, financial institutions, carbon credit offsetters, verifiers, kind of anyone that's in this ecosystem that we need to understand, and including, encryption and blockchain experts. And then we really are starting to phase in, how do we add, broker, the traditional system. This is what you're already doing today. There's brokers that trade this every day. How are they going to interact over in the FinRamp world? So number one, we have, full, very pretty UI, UX front ends to be able to manage all this stuff. But again, sometimes people already have a system. And so again, because we want to be adherent to the traditional finance system, we'll be able to tie in to, traditional SOC 2 APIs to the existing infrastructure they have today. So that's really where we're at right now. As we're going around and identifying all the various ecosystem partners, we're signing them up to test with us. We're getting ready to launch the tech stack right now, but we also want to make sure that before we launch that, we've kind of gone through all those check boxes and said, what does every broker need? What does the offsetters and project managers, what do they need? The verifiers and the KYC and all the other people, like, have we really thought through everything here? And by the way, we now have a chance to enhance the systems that you were using in the past. So let's go think through it. And that's where I think Zem was talking a little about the 1155 token. Is we've gone and said, like, here's the wish list. Like, we went and sat down with MiCA regulators and said, what would be your perfect token design? Like, what can we do that you're kind of stonewalled now that works maybe slightly well in the TradFi world, but hasn't even really been integrated yet into the blockchain based world. And so those are a little bit of the factors we're facing today. And I'm sure Zem can extrapolate a little bit more on all that.
With increased numbers, I think you nailed it, Jay. So honestly, I think it's just like you mentioned, going and really trying to understand what market, I guess, from first point, what market is adhering right now. From second one, what is the wish list that we have from various parties, and then trying to bring this all together. But I mean, obviously, Allan, I don't think it's wise of us to underestimate the initial portion, how much of that is required to stand up the system, and then bringing the right relevant stakeholders to the party. And so that is definitely something that we are very heavily pushing on right now. Anything from signing on strategic advisors to strategic partners, and then bringing in the intermediaries that providing us their wish list is what it would take for us to integrate with their systems and bringing their clients on board.
And of course, you have a team set up to do this. Can you talk a little bit more about the team?
Yeah, I mean, so all of our advisors, and strategic alliance partners are listed on FinRamp.io. So there's no trading going on there, but we really are very much pushing through on the project. And there's even a pitch page, FinRamp.io/pitch, and you can really see and take a look at all these. And so one of the things that we're very, as some gray-haired entrepreneurs that we've been doing this for a long time, I very much believe in the 10,000 hours. So when we're looking at hey, we need to need to have somebody on our advisor list or in our pool that understands encryption. We want, somebody that's got 10,000 hours. We need to have somebody that understands, carbon credits. They need to have at least a decade of experience to be able to advise us. There's a lot of people that are building companies based on ChatGPT and Google searches and everything else. I think that's great. There's a very big difference between those that have done it, tried, failed, try it again, and be able to find those inroads. And so that's the way we look at this. So we're really going out right now, and we've got actually a couple more that are signing on right now that are big names in the carbon credit industry that have been doing this for a decade plus. In some cases, built marketplaces in certain countries that didn't have it and didn't exist. So we're very focused on that experience, that existing experience, and also the ability to kind of integrate the new technologies. That they're saying like, look, what I built, over the last decade plus wasn't perfect, but it was the best we could do with the technology and resources we have. And then they're able to kind of relay to, the blockchain and token experts that are in our ecosystem as well, and say, here's the wish list. Here's the problems we ran into constantly that we just never were able to overcome. And then we can solve those solutions. And again, because we're not just creating a one-to-one parity, which is what would happen if we just did a centralized database. We're actually trying to take this and how do we scale it? Not 10x, how do we scale it 100x? And that's a big dynamic difference to be able to 100x an asset class right now, to go from 2 billion to 200 billion. It's a big dynamic difference. And you have to really think about onboarding. You have to be able to think about integration, compliance, and not, you can't just say, I'm just going to add a bunch of people to sit on the phone. So we're able to take new technologies like AI and integrate it in and make it adhere to rules and regulations that's on the books. No one's going to read, all the MiFID II, books and Bibles. No one's going to sit there and, whatever the case is. But this is what AI is really good at saying, this is a data set that I'm supposed to adhere to. And let's just make sure as we're creating these tokens, let's make sure as we're trading, we're logging and auditing and being compliant along the way. And if it detects something that's wrong, great. Flag it, and a human will show up and make sure that it gets fixed. So we're being working ahead of the game on some of these things like auditing, compliance, and rules and regulations.
That's fascinating. I mean, paint us a picture. What does it look like in 10 years? What does FinRamp look like in 10 years? And what's the use case for, I don't know, whatever, JP Morgan or like a fund or a family office, or maybe like paint us a picture of where do you, in your mind, where do you think this leads? We're talking about like massive asset classes, the infrastructure being built taking advantage of blockchain technology, but what do you think the sort of outcome, the eventual outcome is?
It's hard to, I'll do my best to paint the picture. 10 years is a long way out. I can almost get you 3 to 5. But let's go 10. And I think that what it is think of the difference between posting an ad in the newspaper. Hey, I've got a table and chairs for sale, and it's just black and white text, and you may get a few calls on it, you may get everything else. And then think of the dynamic difference that suddenly eBay had on the world. And it takes time to build trust. It takes time for people to understand and grow and adapt. But it's not just the biggest difference is, eBay is a centralized service. You're either using eBay or you're not using eBay. And so we're kind of that next evolution. The way I think of it is because suddenly you have the ability to have an onboarding solution that provides essentially some sort of SSL type validation verification. Okay, we know who made this token. We know we've adhered to rules and regulations that are in their jurisdiction that this token needs to be created in. We know everyone in the world that wants access to it, and so we can have highly complex smart contracts that interact with that token over days, months, years, or decades to be able to adhere to really complex, workflows. But then the most important thing, and now, and it gets back to your like why blockchain, because then it goes out into the world. That by that point, I feel 10 years from now, definitely, DeFi and will be figured out. The concept of identity and rules and regulations will definitely be satisfied. And so tokens that were created, in 2024 will have stable values in 2034. that what the reason they were created and the way that they have true title on blockchain. And that's the biggest difference is when you're talking about MiFID II compliant tokens and securities, the actual titles there, not like, hey, here's a token and call me up on the phone and I'll give you a redemption. Is that we actually have real assets, real liabilities, and real securities that are now on the blockchain. And suddenly it scales so much more because an investor will have the information they want to know that they like, hey, I like this company in Zimbabwe. I can see that they're highly rated. I can see other people that I've interacted with that have also traded on this system or bought their products or services. I have faith, I have trust, and I have research to say that I'm okay to purchase that and bring it into my wallets, my holdings. And so I think that, again, when we're really talking about a big scalability, I think that the concept of smart contracts as legal contracts, think about something like TARPs and mortgage-backed securities. I think that's one of the best examples. Right now we've had multiple failures in the United States and other countries around. Like there's just these massive baskets of mortgage-backed securities, and nobody knows what they are. Like there's people that know, but it would take days, weeks, months to be able to figure out like what are they all and how do I break them out. And so the banking crisis that we just had earlier this year, Allan, where you had Silvergate and others that were billions and billions of dollars of assets, but they didn't have liquidity. They couldn't break apart those bonds and bond pools and everything else fast enough. But suddenly, if all those are tokens wrapped in other larger, essentially other tokens, then and integrated with AI technology, you can now identify like, look, I need $500 million immediately because I've got a call or I've got a drain. Instead of having to go sell billions of dollars worth of these things at the wholesale market, you can quickly identify, here's the highest value ones that we have. We're going to go ahead and list these and create instant liquidity, instant liquidity. And that's the biggest change and differences. I think that we're able to kind of scale this and create much more complex financial instruments that are much safer than what we're dealing with today. The last point I want to make on that is just remember, like when Bear Stearns went down, it was months when the red flags were thrown, something was wrong, they started an audit. It took another 8+ months before they finally identified like there's massive amounts of fraud, we have to shut this down. When the flags were thrown at FTX, it was hours that they were able to go through. And so that's the biggest difference in the technologies. I think it's safer for the consumers long term, and fraud will be able to identify much faster in the future.
Zem, can I ask you the same question? I mean, you have a rich experience as a strategist with one of the biggest banks in the world, with McKinsey. 10 years from now, where do you see, like, what place do you think FinRamp has, and how does it look for users?
So I think if I were just to go into that evolution, the first one, I think it's interesting to understand why we don't really have this use case yet. And a big part of this is because banks and financial institutions typically don't trust each other. So you actually need some sort of an intermediary party that can bring everyone together and show what great looks like. So my vision of FinRamp is we're going to show what great looks like. And then there are really two options. One is you can white label and bring that into your own systems and then ultimately use what we built to make it more efficient and effective. Or you can use FinRamp as is and then bring in some of your assets to other ecosystem, other places, other execution venues, so that they become much bigger global access and then available to much more investors, and then eventually retail investors as well. So, I mean, as you can see between me and Jay, I'm a little bit more practical. Jay is a little bit more visionary. But I think that's probably what I foresee as the future for FinRamp.
Yeah, I think I just want to tie on to that real quick. You said yin yang, and you weren't sure if that's true. It is absolutely true. Where I'm kind of that, like let's reimagine the entire future. Zem is the centralist that goes like, hey. Do you understand, how strict these laws are? Like, do you understand, how these banks operate and how these things work? And so that's great, Jay. And she goes, Jay, okay, sure. But here's what we have to do today to even be able to have that conversation down the road. So that's where we're really able to kind of have let's build something today that works, that's blockchain, blockchain based, works with TradFi, works on blockchain, but at least we're integrating in that concept of a full DeFi future 5 to 10 years from now, Allan, that you and so many others are investing their time, energy, and capital into.
Okay, well said. Listen, guys, thank you so much for the insight today. I think, in my mind, as I said, I live and breathe DeFi. I spend a lot of time with like crypto builders and yet I think, I'm a pragmatist. I've built businesses before. I know that, sometimes the thing you think you're building doesn't end up that way, especially when you need to conform to specific, very strict regulations. And then you have these like traditional financial institutions that are also building in the space, and this meeting in the middle, this kind of understanding that combining those two approaches and finding out how that can work best, and then moving it forward into like a 10-year from now, look, this is what we think we're aiming for. It's really exciting. So just want to thank you both for your amazing insights, and really looking forward to seeing how you build FinRamp and where it goes. Where can people learn more about you guys, be in touch with you guys, learn more about FinRamp?
Awesome. And Allan, thank you so much. It's great to be on the other side of the chair here. So the easiest one is finramp.io/pitch. So we like to make it very easy on everyone else. You can view my 10-minute pitch on the entire concept right there, as well as, we have full data rooms and everything available, and as well as Zemfira and I's information, as well as all of our advisors and all of our strategic partners are listed there as well. So if anyone really wants to dig into the project, understand it, or get involved, say, hey, I'd like to think about listing assets. I'd like to think about it being involved as a contributor. Everything's right there, and it will be continuing to evolve, very quickly over the next couple months. So finramp.io/pitch. And thank you so much for the time.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.